What's up, y'all? This is BoxingWave. I'm on a little road trip, so I figured I'd do a video. Now that Canelo Alvarez has beaten Erislandy Lara officially, there's a lot of names that's been thrown in that around as far as who's he gonna fight next and who can beat him. You know, since it's such a controversial win for him, a lot of people are bringing names up of fighters that can beat him at 154, okay, or fighters that he should fight next, all right? And I'm not including Miguel Cotto because we all know that fight is made. Like, that fight is already, it's going to happen regardless of who wins and who loses their next fight. That fight is going to be made because that's a fight that's been there's been a lot of demand for that fight for a long time now. So I wanted to bring up some of the other fighters at 154 that's names that's been around the past year or so. Okay, you have the Charlo twins, you have Demetrius Andrade, all right, who's been calling out each other, who's been calling out Lara, not Lara, but that's been calling out Canelo himself, okay? You got James Kirkland, whose name has been brought up recently, the most, as far as I'm concerned right now, he's the only fighter that's been brought up to fight Canelo next, okay, in November. And then you got also Carlos Molina, who's still lingering around. He's at 154. His fight was canceled with Jamal Charlo. And the last time I heard, he's supposed to be fighting K9 Cornelius Brundage in his next fight. All right, but he's still, I believe, the WBO champion. I'm not sure if it's the WBO or IBF. But he's still a title, okay? So, Lara lost. Trout lost to Canelo, okay? As far as that fight is concerned, I wasn't doing videos before that fight. I thought Trout had a good chance of winning that fight, you know? Thought it was a close fight. The fight was actually close, you know? I think Canelo edged him with the knockdown, okay? But I thought leading up to the fight that Trout had a good chance of beating Canelo Alvarez and outboxing. As far as the fight is concerned, I thought Canelo won the fight, right? I thought it was a fair decision. I didn't think the judges were fair. You know, it was open scoring in that fight, and they had it by a wide decision, you know, which I disagreed with. But that fight was in Texas, so you know how that is. But I think Canelo won the fight. You know, I was impressed early on with his head movement. You know, I think at times Trout was outworking Canelo. But I was impressed with Canelo. I was impressed with his upper body movement, his counter-punching in that fight. Okay, we see a little bit of different, you know, Canelo doesn't get credit for what he has done, you know. I think the judges has been on his side somewhat in the last few fights. There's no denying that. The judges are on his side. One of the judges were on his side in Floyd Mayweather fight. All right, see what happened with her. So, but not for nothing, I don't want to say that I'm impressed by Canelo, but I'm neutral with him. You know, I think he's a good boxer. No, I think he's solid across the boards. Right? He's not great at anything, but he's solid all the way around. He's doing enough to not always win the fights, but no one has clearly beaten him outside of Floyd Mayweather to me. Lara didn't clearly win, okay? Lara wasn't robbed to me. I think Lara won the fight based on scoring, but I don't think neither one of them really clearly beat each other. Neither one of them should have got the win for that fight. It should have been a draw because neither one of them did enough, okay? But as far as the scorecard, I gave it to Lara. Now that the fight is over, everyone is saying what fighters can beat Canelo. All right, Canelo lost to these other guys. He's barely winning. And these other new fighters that he hasn't fought, like James Kirkland, the Charlo twins, you got Demetrius Andrade. All of these other fighters can beat Canelo now. Now, in my opinion, before the Lara fight, I thought Lara was the one to clearly beat Canelo. Now that he lost, everyone is going over to the next guy that they think at 154 can beat him. If anyone was going to beat Canelo, clearly beat Canelo, it was going to be Lara, in my opinion, because I think Lara is better than the Charlo twins. Lara is better than Demetrius Andrade, and I think Lara is better than James Kirkland. I don't think that would be a good fight for Lara. I think James Kirkland might be able to beat Lara because of the pressure. But as far as a boxer overall, I think Lara is the better boxer. All right? Now, when it comes to the Charlo twins, they're different. All right? They're different. We know Lara is the best mover out of everyone at 154. Okay? The Charlos are not too far behind. They move very well themselves, and they have a great jab. A great jab, all right? I actually like their jab a little bit better than Lara's, honestly. You know, Lara has a good jab, but Lara uses his jab usually, you know, to measure himself to use that straight left of his, okay? That's his punch. That's the punch that he wants to use it. Jamal and Jamel, they pretty much use that jab throughout the fight, okay? When they throw that jab, it has bad intentions behind it every single time they throw it, okay? They have great movement, and they're willing to let their hands go more than Lara. I don't think defensively the both of them are better than Lara, okay, but they're willing to let their hands go. They do have solid defense, and they have movement as well, all right? Now, the difference between Jamal and Jamel, Jamal has a lot more power, okay? You can see it in his KO ratio. He's in there to knock people out. He has a lot of power. I think Jamal has more power than his brother. I think he has more power than Lara, okay? And I think he has more power than Demetrius Andrade. All right? Out of all of those guys, he has the most one-punch knockout power. I would compare his power to Canelo himself. But the difference between Jamal and Jamel is even though Jamal has more power, Jamel has fought the better fighters. Okay? Jamal has fought nothing but journeymen up to this point. All right? And Jamel has fought Demetrius Hopkins, who is a tough, tricky, slick fighter. Very good defense. Very hard, very good counterpuncher. Very good boxer. Just doesn't have a lot of power. You know, and he's not very aggressive at all. He is a counterpuncher. He's just waiting for you to make a mistake. Very tough fight for Charlo. All right, Charlo won, but it wasn't impressive for him. It was at that time his toughest fight to date. I actually think still his toughest fight was Hopkins. All right, Jamel also fought Gabriel Rosado. All right, a guy that showed how much of a mover Charlo really is. Okay, Gabriel Rosado was the aggressor in that fight. We've seen a lot of movement from Charlo in that fight. We also seen a lot of movement from Charlo. I'm talking about Jamel. We've seen a lot of movement in the Charlie Oda fight. Charlie Oda is a solid journeyman that is very aggressive and very durable. Okay, and he came at Charlo throughout the whole fight. Charlo had to use a lot of lateral movement in that fight. Okay, we haven't seen as much lateral movement with Jamal. Not saying that he doesn't have it, but because I think that he does, but he hasn't had to use much of it. he's only used it when it was necessary because he hasn't fought the aggressive fighters that his brother has faced up to this point. I see a lot of people compare the two of them. A lot of people say Jamal's a better fighter, but Jamal hasn't fought the level of fighters that his brother has fought. Carlos Molina is better than everyone that Jamel has fought, but that fight was canceled. It never happened. So, now, as far as a Canelo fight, I don't know. You know, if both of them fought Canelo, they obviously got the movement that Lara has. So, yes, they will implement a lot of lateral movement in that fight. They're not going to stand in front of Canelo. But the difference is between them and Lara is that they're willing to let their hands go more than Lara. Okay? They're going to counter punch Canelo. They're going to try to counter Canelo. Right? They're going to use a lot of movement. But they're not as defensive as Lara. Okay? They're not. They're going to be more vulnerable to get countered by Canelo as well. All right? Canelo is a big puncher. Neither one of those fighters have fought a puncher like Canelo. I'm talking about the Charlo twins. Neither one of them has fought a fighter as good as Canelo. All right? Overall, Canelo might not be the best boxer, but he's a better boxer than the guys that the Charlo twins have fought. So when I see people say that the Charlo twins will give Canelo problems, I do agree with that. But let's just not straight count out Canelo like he can't win the fights. And if the fights are close, which I think they will be, I think they would give the win to Canelo, you know, because it's happened before. When it comes to close fights, Canelo is going to get the win. And I'm not sure if the Charlos would do good enough to beat Canelo convincingly enough for where they can get the decision, because I don't think either Charlo could knock Canelo out. All right? All 50-50 fights. Now, Demetrius Andrade, southpaw, very different from the Charlo twins and Lara, okay? He's a southpaw like Lara. They fought in the amateurs, even though Lara was a lot older. They fought in the amateurs, but the difference between Andrade and Lara is Andrade, out of him, the Charlo twins, Demetrius Andrade does not have the lateral movement of a Charlo or Lara, okay? He does have power, though. It's arguable between who has more power between Lara and Demetrius Andrade. I want to call it a tie. I think they both have a lot of power in that left hand, okay? So I'm going to call it a tie. I think Jamal still hits harder than both Andrade and Demetrius and Lara. But I do think Andrade hits harder than Jamel. If Demetrius Andrade were to fight Canelo Alvarez, he's going to stand in front of Canelo like Floyd Mayweather did, okay? He's going to try to stand in front of him and outbox him. It's a good chance that he could outbox him, all right? The problem is Demetrius Andrade does not have Floyd's reflexes, doesn't have his defense, okay? Good counterpuncher, but not as good as Floyd Mayweather. He has a lot of power, though, okay? A lot more power than Floyd. He can hurt Canelo, all right? But because he's going to be standing in front of Canelo, he's going to be more vulnerable to get hit and countered as well. We've seen him get dropped by Vanis Martirosyan. By the way, Demetrius Andrade, by fighting Vanis Martirosyan, Martirosyan is a better fighter than all of the guys that both of the Charlo twins have faced to me overall. Okay? Demetrius Andrade, to me, is a champion, slightly more experienced than the Charlo twins professionally, but they're all around the same ballpark. Lara is more experienced than all of them, in my opinion, okay, as a professional. Because Lara has fought nothing but top 154 fighters. But Andrade, the Charlo twins, they haven't fought the top fighters at 154. Everyone has said, in Canelo's defense, everyone has said Canelo has been fighting nothing but smaller guys. When he was fighting Shane Mosley's, the Matthew Hattons, the Alfonso Gomez, all of those type guys, smaller guys that moved up, Josecito Lopez, smaller guys that moved up to fight him. But lately, look at who he's fought. He's fought Trout, a fight that I think Canelo did edge. All right, it could go either way. I think Canelo edged that fight. Okay, he fought Floyd Mayweather, even though he's not at 154. He's pound for pound the best fighter in the world. Okay, he lost that fight convincingly. Okay, then you had Angulo. You got to count Angulo. Angulo is one of the top fighters at 154. Okay, he fought him, and he shut him out, or damn near shut him out in stoppage. Okay, whether you think the fight should have been stopped, Angulo was not going to win that fight. All right, and now he's fought Lara, which a fight that I thought, even though Lara won, I thought it was a very close fight. I thought it could have gone either way, and Canelo did enough to at least get the win. I don't think he deserved the win, but I thought the fight should have been at least a draw because neither one of them did enough. Okay, so you got to give the kid some credit. He's been beating guys at 154. Whether or not you think he won, he's been beating guys at 154. All right. As far as the Charlos and Demetrius Andrade, they haven't fought the fighters that Canelo has fought. All right, they haven't. So when people say that the Charlos and Demetrius Andrade just go in there and beat them, how can you be so sure? I think all of the fights are 50-50 fights. I think Andrade and Charles have a good chance of winning. Or are they going to be beating? Can they beat Canelo clear enough for them to get the decision? Because I don't think any of them can knock Canelo out. I think the fighter that has the best chances of actually stopping Canelo is James Kirkland. Because if James Kirkland can take, we know he has a bad chin, if he can take Canelo's power, which he will have to because he'll be standing right in front of Canelo. If he can take his power and weather the storm and take him into the second half of the fight where Canelo has poor stamina, he'll have a great chance of stopping Canelo. He'll do what Angulo didn't do, okay? Because James Kirkland is a stronger fighter than Angulo. It's much harder, all right? And we seen their fight together. We seen the outcome of that fight. James Kirkland beat Angulo. I think he's a tougher fighter. Maybe not as durable because he has a bad chin, but we've never seen Kirkland get knocked out cold. He's always gotten back up and continued fighting even when he was dropped, right? Most of the time, they're flash knockdowns, all right? So, all fights are close. You know, all of the fights are close. Like I said, I think James Kirkland would have to take Canelo to the second half of the fight. All 50-50 fights, all right, in my opinion. You know, all of them, Jamal, Demetrius Andrade, they all got their strengths and weaknesses. None of them are good enough to a point where I can sit here and say that they would clearly beat Canelo. Because I thought Lara was going to do that. Okay? I thought Lara was going to do that, and he didn't do it. I think Lara is still the best fighter at 154, in my personal opinion. All right? Charlos are very good fighters. we haven't seen them fight top fighters at 154 yet. Do I think they deserve this shot? Yeah, I think they should. I should get. I would like the fights. I would like all of the fights. I would like fight with Andrade as well. I would like one of the Charlos to fight Andrade. I would like. I would like one of them to fight Carlos Molina, and that's another person you got to bring up. Even though I don't see Canelo fighting Carlos Molina anytime soon, let's not forget that he exists. Okay, Carlos Molina is a tough fight for anyone at 154. Okay, I think he was on pace to beat James Kirkland. I don't remember the fight too well, but I think he was disqualified because of the fact that someone on his corner jumped in the ring, okay, while he was down. But before he got knocked down by James Kirkland, and yes, Molina did get back up, he won every round. And that was while Ann Wolfe was training Kirkland. Okay, that wasn't a lazy Kirkland. Ann Wolfe was in his corner. Okay? So, let's not count Carlos Molina out. Jamal was supposed to fight him. And I did a prediction video on that. And I thought Jamal, I gave Jamal the win, but I don't know. It's a tough fight because Carlos Molina is a tricky fighter. And if you don't knock him out, it goes to decision. It's hard to beat Molina. It's hard to look good against Molina, man. He doesn't hit hard, but he'll hit you a lot. It's hard to time him. He does a lot of holding. At times it's hard to get a good rhythm against a fighter like Carlos Molina. He would be a tough fight for both of the Charlos, Demetrius Andrade, Canelo Alvarez. He'll be a tough fight for anyone at 154. I thought the only person that Erislandy lost to was to Carlos Molina. I thought Lara lost that fight. I thought he was given a gift win at that time because Lara at the time was undefeated. I believe that was before the Paul Williams fight. And I thought Molina won that fight. Okay, Lara just could not time him. Lara is great at timing the fighters that he timed Canelo well. He's great at shooting that straight left hand. He's good. He's a great jab. But he could not get off against Carlos Molina. He just couldn't. And at one point, he was forced to be the aggressor, which is not something we're used to seeing him doing. Because Carlos Molina, all the movement, it wasn't giving him. Carlos Molina was staying on top of him. Carlos Molina is a pressure fighter that just doesn't hit hard. He's going to stay in your face. He's tricky. He's slippery. He's going to be in and out. And when he's on the inside, he's going to hold you and clinch. And then when he backs up off you, he's going to bounce back and hit you with a couple of shots on the way back. Great at scoring. All right, Carlos Molina is great at scoring, but the problem with him is that his punches aren't effective. All right, it's not effective. All right, because he's not really doing any damage. He doesn't hit hard. He's hitting pat punches. All right, so anyway, that's how I look at it at 154. I don't think anyone at 154 can clearly beat Canelo. And the only fighter that I think can clearly beat him is James Kirkland. Okay? If he can survive the first 3 or 4 rounds. All right? You know he has a bad chin. The Charlos, Demetrius Andrade, I'm not sure. It will be a close fight because I think they might be slightly superior at boxing. But Canelo has the power. Okay, Canelo has the judges. All right? Canelo is pretty good at countering too. All right? They're not... It would be a good fight. Let me just say that. All right? Clear win. It will go to the decision. I don't know if they can clearly beat Canelo. All right? So, that's it. I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm not going to talk about Miguel Cotto and stuff. Because Miguel Cotto is really the 160 champ now. And we know that fight is going to happen. know, I don't even know who's going to win that fight. You know, that fight is tough to call. All of these fights are tough to call because I don't think Canelo can clearly beat any of these guys. Clearly. All right? I don't think Canelo could knock any of these guys out. All right? Except James Kirkland. I think he can knock out James Kirkland. But I think if anyone has a chance of stopping him, it's James Kirkland as well. All right? Sorry for the long video, but I wanted to bring up a lot of fighters, and I kind of wanted to break each one of them down and separate all of them. Now, all of them, Jamal and Jamel are not the same fighter, you know? And I think people just look at them as twins. They're not the same exact fighter. They're very similar. They're almost identical, but they're different in certain ways, you know? I think Jamel's a little bit quicker. I think he's a little bit faster with the hands, and I've seen a little bit more movement, lateral movement in the ring with him. But Jamal hits a lot harder. You know, he'll knock guys out. And they're both really good fighters, and I think they both have a chance of beating Canelo. But would it be a clear win, enough for the judges to pick the two of them? I don't know. Same thing with Andre. You know, Andre's going to stand in front of Canelo and try to outbox him. That's what he would do. He would try to outbox him. You know, he's not afraid to let his hands go at all. And there's very lateral. He has good footwork, but he doesn't really use it that much. All right? So it's hard to say. It's hard to call with all of these fighters. All right? The reason why I made the video, because I don't want people to, every time Canelo fights someone, everyone goes into, all right, well, Canelo got a gift for that fight. You know, this fighter will beat him. And then after if he beats one of these fighters, it'll be the next guy, and then the next guy. Or if he loses, even if he loses, it'll be like this guy. No, I don't think any of these fighters can clearly beat Canelo. All right? Sorry for the video being so long. I'm out. Peace.